Welcome to the Rock the Stage Show. Each week, international media expert Rich Bontrager has in-depth and personal conversations with celebrities, top leaders, authors, speakers, and media professionals. Now, from the Rock the Stage studios, here's your host, The Trigger, Rich Bontrager.
Welcome back to the Rock the Stage Show Sunday night. It's The Trigger, Rich Bontrager here with you again. Going around the world to bring you the best of the best in many different categories, from movie, writers, public speakers, artists, you name it, we bring it all right here. And the burning question is, who are they? What are they doing? And what stage are they rocking? That's a lot of the times. But let me ask you this question tonight. Have you ever wondered what it takes or who it might be to be the next generation great playwright, the great director of the future? Where do they come from? How do they develop their skills? And what puts them on the map to get noticed and keep going up and up and up in the eyes of their peers and the audience? Who is that next person? And what makes it happen? Is it talent? Is it being in the right place at the right time? Is it someone opening up that door and magically the next level happens for them? Or is it pure dumb luck? What does it take to go that direction? Tonight, we may just get a few of those answers and some insights from our guests tonight. In fact, we're going all the way back over to London tonight with our guest. My guest is Tomos Roberts, known as Tomfoolery. He's a spoken word poet, the performer, and filmmaker. And get this, during the 2020 lockdown, the original poem, The Great Realization, went viral with over 100 million views. Boom. That's not bad. Then on January 1st of 2024, he released the Spaceman, an anti-bully film that he produced and directed, starring Colin Farrell, Norman Amanda Abbington. So welcome to the Rock the Stage Show tonight, the Tomfoolery himself, Tomos Roberts, and welcome.
Hey, Rich, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on tonight, man. You cover a lot of categories. Let me tell you, it's hard to do research on a guy that does it all.
I try to keep myself busy, definitely.
It really is cool to look at your IMDb and to look at your background. But first of all, what made you brand yourself Tomfoolery? What made that come out?
That started back in my university days. I was a budding spoken word poet, and I was trying to get on as many lineups as I can of shows around Manchester, England, which is where I studied. And I remember doing the first couple and signing my name up and seeing the poster for the show, and it said Tom Roberts. And I remember looking at it and just thinking, that is so boring. That doesn't. If I saw that,
There's a billion of Tom Roberts, right? There's every
so
Tom
many.
Roberts.
And growing up, I was always quite interested in these performers that had these pseudonyms to perform under. David Bowie famously had Ziggy Stardust, and there's something lovely about having this character that you step into when you get on stage. And I was looking for a stage name. I was looking for something that involved the word Tom, because it would keep that sense of me, but then also something that gave the audience ahead of time a bit of a sense of the tone and the vibe that I'd be performing with, and Tomfoolery just fit perfectly. So I went with that, and I've never looked back. That was when I was 19, and now I'm 30.
Well, that's kind of how Trigger was born. Trigger's the very same kind of backstory, because Rich Bontrager meant nothing to anybody. And sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to do something that sets you aside to make it memorable and stand out in the crowd. What did your family think of that? What did your family think of, I'm going to brand myself as Tomfoolery?
Well, until 2020, no one really thought anything, because it was just my stage name for whenever I got on stage. And to be honest, for the first 7 years of performing, it was really mainly open mic nights around the city. There wasn't any social media following, there wasn't any notoriety or anything like that, and so it was sort of inconsequential what my stage name was. It was just something that whenever I signed up,
it was only for you, right?
For me. Whenever I signed myself up to get on an open mic night, it would be introducing Tomfoolery instead of Tom Roberts. And then really it took a hold in the pandemic when that poem that you mentioned in the intro, when that went viral, because I'd been creating these videos under the name Tomfoolery. My channel was called Tomfoolery, and Tomfoolery was written as the logo on the poem. Suddenly, that really cemented overnight, and now I get messages from young kids who follow the channel, and it says "Dear Mr. Foolery," and I just think it's the cutest thing in the world.
Well, let's talk about that. So, what adjustments did you have to make after that poem went viral? 100,000 views.
100 million.
100 million. Sorry, I knew I was going to do that. But 100 million, because that doesn't happen too often. What was it like for you when you moved the needle that far, that fast?
Boy, though I know you know full well, the story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, but they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned.
Well, it was a very strange time to have your viral moment. You know, I know these days lots of people have their viral moment because the internet is so wild like that. But for me, it was really in the first month of a total global lockdown. And so I remember this one day where I was on the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna. I was on the equivalent show in the UK, in India, in New Zealand, Australia, Philippines. And then that same day, it was my turn to clean the bathroom at home, and I was scrubbing the toilet. And I just done a spoken interview on every continent from my bedroom like this, and then I'm there with my sponge and scourer, and I'm thinking, wow, is this what it feels like to make it? This is this is unique. So it was a very strange time to have such a moment.
Did you have to make personal adjustments when you did go from unknown to he is really known now? Did you have to make any personal changes?
And it wasn't really until 2021 when the world started to open up again, and I started to get requests to perform on some stages that were
pretty big stages.
That were bigger than I was used to.
Stages.
Yeah, it wasn't until then that I think it really hit me how much things had changed.
What made you write The Great Realization?
I like before taking on a piece of writing, I like to spend a fair amount of time thinking about what I want to say and what the goal is and what I'm trying to say. And I think that around that time, I had these two little people who were just starting to understand the world, who they were in the early years of school, and then suddenly something very strange had happened, and they were looking to me. I was 25 years old. They were looking to me to explain this to them and to make it make sense. And I was a 25-year-old guy. I'd been trying to pursue life as a filmmaker. We'd just finished our first film, myself and my two best friends, and gotten it into film festivals around the world, and suddenly they're all cancelled. My business has fallen apart, and I'm living back home. And so I was trying to make sense of the world as well, and trying to find the right words to explain it to two very little ones. And so the inspiration for the poem was to try and tell a hopeful story in a time that didn't feel very hopeful. Particularly, you'd turn on the news and it seemed to be a 24-hour rolling fear fest.
Yes.
You'd find out how many people had died in your country that day, and it would be pitted against how many people had died in another country that day. And it was and I understand why, but it was a non-stop festival of fear. And my challenge that I set myself during that time period was to think, okay, what is the hopeful narrative in a moment like this? And that wasn't easy, because it's really easy in a moment like that to give way to those feelings of despair and things are never going to be good again, and when is this going to end, and are we all going to be okay? It's easy to give into those thoughts, and I started thinking, okay, what is good? Even if that's a really difficult question, what is good about
Hmm.
this moment? And then I started to notice things. I started to notice how I was reconnecting with family members who, for a long period of time before that, I wasn't paying much attention to, and maybe was starting to be so busy and starting to be so
Hmm.
selfishly fixated and focused on my own life and what I had going on, and career developments and things like this. And suddenly I was spending every day with my little brother and sister, and I was starting to really like that. And that's a confusing thought, because I thought, why did it take a pandemic for me to get to know my little brother and sister?
But everyone went
Um,
through that. Everyone went through that realization of busy life, career. Oh, maybe we
yeah,
should be home more with our kids playing ball. Maybe we should
yeah,
be in the backyard playing board games. Or a lot of people went through that same realization
yeah,
of, what have I done to my life?
completely. And then if you looked for them, you started to see hopeful things emerging online. As I started to notice these things, the lines of the poem just started to emerge,
Mm,
and I thought, this poem is in three sections. It's how the world was in 2019 and before. It's a
yeah,
world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty. It's this kind of world that was wonderful and broken at the same time. And then something came along, as it does in every film that we love, or every story that we love. If it's Lord of the Rings,
yes.
suddenly Sauron's army. If it's Harry Potter, suddenly Voldemort's come back. If it's Star Wars, suddenly Darth Vader's assembled an army. And this is how all the stories that we know and love always are structured. There's three stages.
Mhm.
Things are stable. And what does stable mean? Stable means it could be better, but it could be worse. Things could go on like this.
Yes.
Then they're unstable. The threat emerges, the obstacle, the big bad wolf, and then they're resolved. And when they're resolved, what's interesting is they aren't supposed to just go back to how they were before.
Right.
You're supposed to learn something. You're supposed to improve something. When you reemerge and when you overcome whatever the great period of difficulty was, you're actually supposed to find yourself in a better situation than you were before. And I think that's something that we started to forget during that period of time, because I heard a lot of people say, myself included, I can't wait for things to go back to normal.
Right.
And actually that's a really pessimistic thought, because normal is not desirable. If you took the Harry Potter series, normal is he lives under the stairs with the Dursleys, and no one knows about his magical powers and nobody cares. And it's like, when he's battling Voldemort, he's not supposed to wish that he could go back to living under the stairs with the Dursleys. That's not the right goal. The goal is you emerge into something you've never known before, that's even better than anything you've ever experienced. And that was the goal of the Great Realization. The goal was to tell the story of how we could emerge from that difficult period of time, which would pass, just like all things pass, but we'd be wiser, and we'd be more thoughtful, and we could hopefully be healthier, and we could be more attuned to what life's meant to be about. And that was the goal.
So, hard question. Have we stayed on that journey, or have we reverted back?
To tell you the truth, no, it doesn't feel like, just because we've come out of the period
Right.
of pandemic, or just because we've come out of lockdown. Um,
But it's interesting because your personal mission, is to present a message of hope,
mhm,
optimism, and
mhm,
social constructive and progressive ideas through your words. Now, did
mm.
that start before pandemic? Before that was kind of your mission, or did this come about because of everything you're just talking about?
Generally speaking, I think that human beings have this interesting ability to create the world, as they go. And we can do this in many ways. There are certain people who are very, you know, geniuses of engineering or of technology, and then you have a group of people that that I'm associating myself with, who like to create stories,
Yeah.
and creative offerings, whether that's through music or imagery or film or poetry or any of these creative offerings. And I think that the special thing to be found there is you can bring things into existence through words and ideas, and that's kind of incredible in a way. There are some pieces, whether they're songs or films or even poems, that I've experienced throughout my life that have really affected me and
Mhm.
changed the way that I act. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to contribute to that enormous, powerful play that is just going on, and each of us get to contribute our verse. And I'm, dedicating my time and energy into trying to figure out what my little verse is in that great offering.
We're all writing our own stories. Whether we know
Yeah.
it or not, we're writing our own stories. Now, you're a spoken word poet. Spoken word poet is kind of like the old speakeasy. Grab a mic, get
Mm,
up and speak. There's
mm.
not a lot of people really biting into that. They're not really sinking their teeth into it, but you kind of made that one of your anchors. What got you into the spoken word poetry or storyteller?
Mm. I loved when I was little. I loved stand-up comedians. I thought that they were the. I thought I mean I still love stand-up comedians. I think that they're the most important art form for me for so many reasons. Not least of which because they're the last line of if you've got great stand-up comedians in your country, firstly, it shows you've still got freedom of speech, because countries that don't allow freedom of speech, they get rid of the comedians first.
Right.
so, so if you've got
News
stand-up
people
comedians,
second, by the way. The media goes second.
yeah, the media goes second, but the stand-up, the people that can make fun of the king and not get their head chopped off, those are the people who, they're the canary in the coal mine for whether things are becoming corrupt. And so, firstly, they're the group of people that are allowed to make fun of things, and they're the group of people that are allowed to tell the truth, because often humor
Oh,
is found by pointing out what's true and articulating it in a playful way that is not mean spirited but often risky. These are the best, and you do get bad stand-up comedians, just as
oh
you
yeah.
get bad everything. You get bad journalists, and you get bad instances in every profession. But the real geniuses are the
Yes.
people who can articulate what's going on, often the things that are known but unsaid, in a way that's not mean-spirited, but often wickedly funny. And so the other thing that I think is incredible about that particular profession is they don't need anything. I love live music, but it's sometimes so incredible, particularly to me as someone who's interested in words, to see someone with nothing but a microphone
Right.
and an audience.
Yes.
And they'll be on stage with just a stool and a microphone, and
Right.
that's it. There's no thrills and effects. Sometimes it's just someone articulating their ideas, and I
Well,
absolutely love that.
let me point at that, because I've watched a lot of your stuff, and you're not just a storyteller, you are a presenter. Your body language, your voice, your rhythm, the tone, everything you do comes alive in a way that people have got to lean in their seats. They've got to listen to. Where did you learn that? Because a lot of people can grab a mic and speak, but not many can be a performer and present the way you do. Where do you learn that?
Thank you very much, Rich. I appreciate that. Probably the same way that you learnt it, from not being very good at it, but being determined to be good at it. I remember the first time I stood on a stage. I was 13 years old, and my school was hosting an evening of words and music. and pupils would be able to sign up their name and perform in front of about 200 teachers and parents.
Yeah.
And I really knew that there was something interesting to me about that poster, because I kept walking past it, and every time I looked at it, I felt a feeling of both fear and excitement at the same time.
Yes.
And I caught myself just going past it, even when I didn't need to, and thinking, no, I could never do that. I could never get on stage and speak in front of that many people. That's terrifying. But the more I looked at it, the more I started to realize that I was being called. I needed to sign up, and so I signed up. And I remember I had my poem. I didn't know what to do, because I'm not very good at singing and I'm not very good at dancing. So I decided I was going to write a poem, and this was the first time I ever read out a poem to a group of people in public. And I had my little poem on a piece of paper, and I remember going on stage, and I was terrified. And my little hands were shaking, and the piece of paper was flapping like this. And I got through it, and I came off stage, and I was so pumped, full of adrenaline,
Yes.
that even though I did a terrible job in terms of, anyone looking at the performance would have thought that was not a very good performance. I knew that even if I never earned a penny from doing that for the rest of my life, I was going to do it again and again and again and again and again, because I didn't feel time. I felt completely alive.
Isn't that amazing?
And
You lose yourself, don't you?
completely.
You
And
probably don't even remember the words you say sometimes. I don't. It's like it's gone. It was thrown out to the universe and it's gone. I go back and I'm like, what did I say?
yeah, it's such a unique situation to find yourself on a stage talking to a group of people. And I remember thinking, actually, that I was 13, and that was one of the last times I ever took the words on with me, because I remember how embarrassed I was that the paper was flapping and revealing my nerves. It was revealing to everyone how scared I was, because the paper was going doosh, doosh, doosh. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm never going to take the words on again. I'm always going to learn it before. And, I'm going to learn how to stand and how to speak and when to gesticulate and what actions capture people's attention, and what looks, when your arms are locked off, what looks, really nerve wracking. And then it becomes a 17-year journey of repetition, trial and error. And over the course of 17 years, if you keep putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you start to become comfortable in an uncomfortable situation.
Do
You start to.
Do you watch yourself on tape? Do you review your performances and say, I have to watch myself now?
I used to more than I do now. At the beginning, I used to record live performances and watch them, not so much in a oh, look at me there kind of way, but I used to be quite analytical about whether my posture was good, or whether whether I was pacing and I should have been staying still, and whether I was speaking too quickly. And I would say for the first decade, I used to do that a lot more. And now I don't watch myself on tape as much, but I do after I come off stage. I always spend a little time reflecting on how it felt, and it's much more internal about how it felt from my perspective rather than how it looked. And so I'll come off and I'll spend about 20 minutes just thinking, okay, why did it, why did people get up to go to the loo in that part, and that's the part that they always leave, and was I, is it in the writing or was it in the performance? And in this part I couldn't hear a pin drop. So you start to know, as a public speaker or performer, you start to know when you've got them
Yes.
and when you don't. And it's really interesting, because I've got this show that I took on tour in 2021, late 2021, and it became really interesting doing the same thing night after night, because actually you start to notice that the audience is a living thing, and it 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 would always be, even if the audience were completely different people, it would always be the same moments that you'd hear people go to the bar, or you'd hear the sweet packet opening, and you start to think, wow, wow, when you really have an audience in the palm of your hand, they're just hypnotized.
Yes.
They don't even move a muscle for fear of breaking the magic. And if you don't have them, that's when you see the lights shining in the audience, because people are checking WhatsApp. They're checking their phones, or they're going to the bathroom or to the bar, and you start to think, okay, so it's your responsibility as the conductor of this massive people to try and make this performance, this continuous thread that takes them all the way from when you first open your mouth to the very end. And if you can do that, you just feel incredible.
Now let's jump to the Spaceman, because film, I mean, spoken word, teaching younger family members, all these things. But now you are producing and co-directing the Spaceman. The film blends cinematography, storytelling with poetic style. And if that's not enough, you get Colin Farrell to voice the Spaceman. How cool is that? How did this whole thing develop?
And I remember during the months after the Great Realization took off, a really close friend called AJ, he approached me with a script that he'd written. And he said, Tom, will you read this and tell me what you think of it? And, that wasn't the first time that a friend had asked me to read a script of theirs, but I remember sitting down and thinking, okay, let me read his script and then I'll write him some notes. And it was the first time ever that I got to the end of a script.
Yeah.
And thought, let me read this again. And I went right back to the top and I read the whole thing through twice in a row, because something in the story really resonated deeply with me. And when I finished reading it for the second time, I called him up and I said, this is brilliant, and I think we should make it. I think we should make this. And I was currently in the midst of the aftermath of this great viral poetry hit, and what that meant was that I had access to people within the entertainment industry who I would never normally have access to.
Yep.
In times gone by, and it just so happened that Colin Farrell's children had shown him the poem, because he's not really on social media, and so being able to converse with him and being able to convince him to take one of the parts in the film really kick-started the momentum that we needed to produce this piece. And it took 2 years to fully produce, from script stage to completion, because there's poetry in there's VFX, there's filmmaking, as is it's quite a slow process. And finally in 2024 I released the film on my YouTube channel, and it's called The Spaceman, if anyone wants to see.
Now, it's an anti-bully film.
Yes.
Which I'm a huge fan of anti-bully. I'm a big supporter because I was bullied horrendously growing up. So the fact that you didn't just make a film, you made a film with a message, a very important message. Was that what grabbed you when you read it? Was it part of the message inside that grabbed you, or what grabbed you to read it twice in a row and go, we got to do this?
Yeah, I mean, the character, the main character in the film was the exact same age as my little brother. And I'd also, one of the things that happened since the Great Realization went viral that was really affecting is suddenly I started getting asked to go into schools and to talk to them about poetry and creative writing. And for the first year, that was mainly over Zoom. And then when the world started to open up, I started to go in person. And to date, I've been into more than 500 schools around the UK and around the world, in different countries that I've traveled to. I've communicated with some charities in the UK who been helping children, because actually there are many tragic instances of children who are bullied so badly that
Oh yeah.
sometimes they turn to very final means,
Yep.
things that can't be undone. And you wish in those instances that someone kind and thoughtful who was looking out for them could say to them, it's not always going to be like this, and actually your life is long, and you're going to be able to do so many things that can take you out of this situation and make things better. And you can't see that right now, but it is there. And so the film was an effort to tackle that, in a unique way.
And yet powerful, extremely powerful. It's on the YouTube channel. Make sure you go check it out. But I also want to go to, again, you talk about doors opening up, your status begins to grow. The people who gave us today, a BBC's D-Day 80th anniversary program, and you spoke poetry, and the list of celebrities and political leaders is staggering. And there you are on stage. What does that event mean to you to be a part of that assembly on that day, celebrating D-Day?
The course of the Second World War had been altered. The fight for democracy would soon be won.
Across the ports of southern England, as nightfall fell, some stopped to pray. A monumental Operations Eve was 80 years ago today. They watched and waited for their window, calculated tides and tempestuous weather. And as Normandy slept, the stage was set for a day that would change the world forever.
And so I got the call when the BBC were planning the big show that they were going to put on for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And what was surreal was I sat down to write that poem, and realized that the event that I was trying to put words to, I was not alive for. I've never had to experience anything of that magnitude in my life, and yet the people who actually got off those boats and ran up the beach into machine gun fire would be in attendance. There was at least 20 people in the audience who had fought on D-Day, and they were going to be there listening. And this 30-year-old poet who has never been anywhere near a war was going to be trying to find the right words to articulate that story. And when you really think about that, and you begin to do your research into letters and documentaries and texts and films that really present what that meant, what that day represented, you feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude and and a desire to be both grateful whilst also not being jingoistic, or whilst not trying to suggest that this was something that we want to repeat again and again and again as a human race,
Yep.
while trying to not glorify war, but trying to suggest that we should be grateful to the people that made that sacrifice so that we shouldn't any longer, and that's something that I really thought about when I was writing that poem. I didn't want to write a poem that said, let's all put our boots on and look around the world to see where we could do that again.
What was it like to be on the stage with those people and to get the crowd response you got?
I was really excited to meet Dame Helen Mirren.
Yes.
She
Helen
was
Mirren introduces you, sets you up.
Yeah, that was a really exciting moment to meet her, and to she introduced the poem, and I think we all have these individuals who we've been watching in films and some of our favorite stories since we were really little, and she's one of those people. So that was one of those starstruck moments where you just
Pinch
can't quite
myself while you're
believe it.
standing there next to her talking to her. You just kind of
Yeah,
hang on. Yep, I'm alive.
yeah, and from where I was stood on the stage, behind me, uh, was a full lineup of current active servicemen and
Yes.
women. In front of me, I can see the box of um, men and women who were active and involved in D-Day 80 years ago, and then to the other side, there's the current royal family and prime minister, and so you're just surrounded by things that are completely impossible to comprehend
Right.
for a 30-year-old, you know, Welsh boy who grew up in the suburbs of London, who remembers being 13 and getting up on the stage and holding the poem that's flapping. And suddenly you think, this is a 15-year journey of standing up on stage and being absolutely petrified to standing up on the biggest stage
Oh,
of my life in a live scenario with huge consequences for doing a terrible job, or for forgetting my words, or for stuttering, or for any of these things. And being able to navigate that was a huge feeling of it was very rewarding feeling, because you start to realize that whenever it's your goal to get better at something, you have these checkpoints that remind you that you're progressing, and that
right.
was that was one of them.
Oh, that's got to be a huge check mark by that because you're not one of them. You now belong in that lineup with Helen Mirren and all these celebrities and Colin Farrell. You now actually have made your way into that circle. Has that hit you yet? That you now belong in that circle?
I don't know. I I think that you know I think that it's very healthy to have the imposter syndrome that so many people have, where you deep down you don't think that you belong on those stages or in those circles. And actually, I'm happy that I have that feeling, and I think if that feeling ever goes away, I think you're in really dangerous territory.
Well, Thomas, this has been absolutely great, but I'm going to bring up your YouTube channel. Now, your YouTube channel has a lot of your mini shorts. It has your video content. Tell us what they're going to find there. What's one of the best videos to go pick out and watch to get a sense of who you are?
So yeah, on my YouTube channel, there's my poetry videos, some of my key live performance videos, and some films. So, the Spaceman, the film that we spoke about earlier, is on
Yep.
there. It's 40 minutes long. I think it's a great watch if you've got little children between the age of, I don't know, 6 and 11. I think it'll really hit home. And um, yeah, that would be a really nice, entertaining offering. If you're interested in poetry, some of the notable ones would be the Great Realization from the Panic, the People Who Gave Us Today, which is the D-Day performance that Rich just
Yeah.
referenced. A Tale of Two Mindsets is quite a nice one, because it features Tom Felton, who's the Harry Potter actor that played Draco Malfoy, and
Yes.
we got together and did a poetry collaboration. So a lot of the young people in the schools that I go into like that one.
Thomas, this is absolutely fabulous. Now, I do have to ask you, you've done a lot of different things. Your star is still rising, but which do you like more? Do you like writing, spoken word performing? Do you like directing? Do you like acting? Which do you really love now? Because you've kind of covered it all.
I don't think I've covered anything, but well, I haven't mastered anything. Maybe that's the better way to put it. I think that um, I enjoy all forms of storytelling, and I'm really curious to and hungry to improve in all of those areas that you just listed. But if someone said to me, you can only do one and you can't do any of the others, it would always be standing on a stage with nothing but a microphone.
Tomos Roberts, thanks for being on Rock the Stage tonight. This has been absolutely favorite. We're going to keep watching because I know you're going to keep going up and up and up, man.
Thank you for having me, Rich. And I really...
Tomos Roberts on Rock the Stage tonight. Again, wonderful. Again, the star is rising. How does it happen? You heard him. Some of it's his own desire. Some of it's doors open up. Sometimes it's after you're known, people start calling you. How does it all happen? There's no one straight path to having the star rise the way it does for Tomos, but we're glad it is. Again, go check him out, follow him, learn more, and pursue your dreams. And I love what he's doing with his own message. We don't need the negative. We don't need the people bringing us down more and more. Be a person of light, joy, fun. Help bring more fun back to our world. That's going to do it for this week for Rock the Stage. We'll be back here at 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, every Sunday night with another edition of Rock the Stage. And once again, you never know who's going to be here with another unscripted but highly fun conversation. We'll see you then for Rock the Stage.